Okay. So one more time, we're recording the class, and this is me, Dr. Samih Abdel Jalil, and this is going to be our last class. We're wrapping things up. We're doing the second part of the chapter on Ireland. Prior to starting the recording, I was talking about how fascinating the chapter is, given the fact that it is about people that we may identify with because of the shared experience, the fact that like the Irish, we were also under British and French occupations for years and years. And I said that this is kind of this what links us to them, and this what makes the chapter interesting and worthy of our attention and concern. I said if you read the chapter more than one time, you'll find that the writer is taking you to a direction that you may not approve of. The idea that he is, I wouldn't say scornful of those attempts at reviving history in order to serve a noble cause. And what would be more noble than claiming what is yours? And what is yours here would be asking for independence, for asking the occupier to leave your country, and you start taking over and managing your own affairs as an independent country. I said that we need to be very alert to the idea that the writer is not very objective. Yeah, at least this is how I see him or them, because obviously we have two writers for the chapters. Anyway, like I said, the focus in the chapter is on the what the writer refers to as creating or inventing um, um, tradition. The fact that he says or he is calling on the readers not to take history and tradition for granted, and he is perhaps insinuating that what we read in history books is not all true, is not all original, and the fact that there are parts of history that are crafted and manufactured so that they can serve political and cultural purposes. Um, okay, so it's Ireland. The material is on Ireland. Spoke about Ireland, if you still remember. And what did we say about Ireland? We said that Ireland is, I think it's time that we shared also the book. Let me just see how I can do that. Okay. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the map of Ireland, right? If we have a larger map, if we have a bigger map where we have the entire Europe, so you're going to find that Ireland is Ireland and also Britain are on top of the map, a little bit to the west. So anyway, this is Ireland, as you can see, and Ireland is like Britain. These are islands, And of course, if they are islands, so they are surrounded by water from everywhere. So as you can see, this is Ireland. This is actually perhaps a recent map of Ireland, but it hasn't changed a lot or much. The fact that you have Ireland and to to the east of Ireland, you would have Britain. Okay, so if you focus on Ireland itself, you will have Ireland. It's different geographical parts, whether you talk about the south, the north, the west, and of course the east. If you look at the north, you have what we now call Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland is, I wouldn't call it a country. It's a special entity, political entity that the British made sure they have that they leave behind. It's not. That's of course it should be part of a larger or the larger Ireland, but it's not. It's they have semi-independence, and there is a great deal of talk so that they can eventually be part of larger Ireland. We'll talk about the treaties that have been agreed on so that Northern Ireland enjoys the status that it has now. So again, when we talk about Ireland, whether we're talking about Northern Ireland or the rest of Ireland, we're talking about 32 counties, and counties are more like states or perhaps cities. So you have 32 counties. Okay, so you have Northern Ireland, is made up of 6, and the rest of the counties are what make or what makes the Free State of Ireland. Okay, so what's happening now is that the larger Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, is trying to kind of reach out to Northern Ireland so that they can become one part again, as they have always been. This is political, and it remains to be seen when this will come to fruition. Okay, so again, what do I want to say before I leave the map? I would like to say that Northern Ireland is where the loyalists to the British Crown, to the British rule, are. So Northern Ireland, with its 6 counties, are loyalists, are unionists in the sense that they want to be in union with Britain. They don't want to separate or have independence away from Britain. The rest of Ireland are called Republican. Republican in the sense that they want to have independence of Britain. They don't want to be part of Britain. They want to have their own independent state, and they keep saying that when actually they have that now. They are independent, and in their fight for their independence, they used to always say that our system is going to be democratic, is going to be not. We don't want a monarch. We don't want a king or a queen. We want a head of state, and this is actually what they are having now. What else about also before I leave the map, in Northern Ireland, where the Unionists and the Loyalists are, we have the majority are Protestant. Protestant are Christians who have their own denomination, they have their own rituals, and they have their own way of doing things religion wise. The rest of England are Catholic, and Catholic is another religious Christian denomination. Denomination is a branch of religion. Like, for example, if we talk about Islam, you have Shiites, you have Sunnis. So it's the same thing. You in Christianity, you have Catholics, and you also have Protestants. So again, Northern Ireland is for the most part Protestant, while the rest of Ireland is for the most part Catholic. So does it make a difference? Yeah, it did make a difference when the British were there, where the Catholic majority were put at a disadvantage. They didn't have enough rights with the political or otherwise. They were not given access to good education, to good health care, unlike the Protestants in the north. Any specific reason? Yes. There is one big reason why this discrimination used to happen. You need to remember that Northern Ireland and the counties of Northern Ireland, the six that we spoke about, are Protestant, and England or Britain is also Protestant. So it's only natural that they would claim all the rights and they would enjoy all the rights at the expense of the Catholic majority. Is this going to change? Absolutely, as we're going to see. So let's leave this part and move on. Again, it's Ireland, everyone, and it's the invention of tradition. I mean, even it is true that the writer is kind of putting up a claimer right from the very start and saying that by the word invention, I don't mean any. I mean well, and I don't mean the reader to understand it in a negative way. But whatever he said afterwards proves and confirms our impressions that he meant it in a negative way. Again, the invention of tradition. So do people invent traditions? Tradition are up for grabs. They have always been there, and you don't invent traditions. Okay, so what does he exactly mean by the invention of tradition? He means that sometimes people, create myth, create mess about certain events in their past to serve certain needs and purposes. Okay, so by the word invention, the writer or the writers, because like I said, we have two writers. We mean the crafting and the manufacturing of certain, sets of tradition. Again, according to the writer, this invention is never innocent because, according to him or them, it would serve political and cultural purposes. So again, you have the associations, the negative associations right from the very start, from the title of the book. The chapter, I'm sorry, not the book. Okay. So this is the items that we're going to address ourselves to in the chapters. So we'll engage in a bit of talk about history and tradition, and then we go to the focus of the chapter, which is the invention of tradition, and then we talk about what created and invented those sets of tradition. We talk about the need that was there for this creation and this invention of tradition according to the writers. And in our case, we're talking about Ireland and the struggle for independence that they had, and the need for tradition and for the invention and the creation of certain myths and certain narratives that can help them in their struggle. We'll talk about Irish nationalisms, and we'll talk about political nationalism and cultural nationalism. So political nationalism would have to do with how people, the nationalists, the nationals who believe that Ireland should be independent once and for all, we'll see how they work towards achieving that goal. Again, it wouldn't be enough to have to achieve independence by simply talking to the other, and the other here would be the British government. It wouldn't be enough. You would need the support of your own people. So how would you have this support? You would need to revive this in them, this sense of tradition and this sense of history, that their history is as important and as glorious as the history of the British, their culture, and its different manifestations are also as important and as rich as those of the British. So you're trying to strike barrels between the British and the Irish, of course, in favor of the Irish, so that you can eventually achieve independence. We'll talk about significant events in the history of the Irish cause. We'll talk about Easter, the rising of 1916 at Easter, and what happened and how transformational this event was. And we'll talk about what happens after 1916, because obviously 1916 was a turning point, and then you have in certain other significant dates and what happens after. And then we move on to the idea of the decisions and the policies that the Irish, the newly independent Irish government will take when it comes to their national heritage. And there is going to be some kind of division over what to restore and what to preserve and what not. And we'll see whether the government decisions to perhaps restore certain monuments would have to do with objective reasons, aesthetic, for example, artistic reasons, or is it also going to be political and having to do with what they feel towards the British. Okay, so let's go on. Again, we're the material that we're having is, of course, Ireland and the history of Ireland and the history of the struggle of Ireland. We're focusing especially on on the 19th and the 20th century. Again, one of the aims would be to show how ideas about the Irish past were mobilized by nationalists to give credibility to their cause. Okay, so as you can see, the writer is dealing with it as a foregone conclusion. He's trying to show or confirm the impressions that he is trying to create in us, that the ideas about the Irish past were mobilized to give credibility to the national cause. We'll see. And we'll talk about the time after independence, like I told you, and the policies that the government had concerning the conservation of sites and monuments in Ireland, and whether the decisions are, perhaps influenced by nationalist agendas or not. Again, we'll talk about history and how history and tradition are invented according to two famous historians. And then, of course, while talking about all of that, we will be talking about primary and secondary sources. I just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. If you can hear me, please say something.
Yes, Doctor, we can.
Okay,
Yes.
good. Nice. Okay. We're starting the chapter with a very significant event in the history of the Irish cause and the Irish struggle for independence. And that event, that significant event, is is in the year 1916 on or at Easter, where there was this revolt, if you would like to call it a revolt, a rebellion. So we can call it a revolt, a rebellion, uprising. And they, as you can see, all give you the sense that people are taking up arms. They are taking to the streets in massive numbers, and they are trying to effect a change. They are obviously not happy about something, and they take to the streets to change it by perhaps taking up arms against the ruling body or the government. And this is actually what happened in 1916, where you have this uprising. And this uprising was masterminded by Patrick Pearse and James Connolly. And those are, the leaders of the uprising. Those are the people who lobbied for and promoted and called for the uprising. So lots of people took to the streets. And the next thing you know is that they went to the General Post Office in Dublin, and they took over, they occupied it, and they even declared what they termed or named as the Provisional Government of the Irish Republic. Okay, so they took over the GPO or the General Post Office, and they declared that from now on we in Ireland are a republic. We're not a monarchy. We're not part of the British monarchy anymore. And we are creating our own government, and we're going to rule ourselves. And we're saying that is provisional. Provisional means it's temporary because we're going to take further measures later. And they made a proclamation. Proclamation means a declaration. Okay, so it's like a manifesto. When you start something, you make a declaration. You say, we the people of I don't know what are inviting people to do this and that. So this is part of the proclamation. Is if you can see that. It was a proclamation or a declaration where they say Irishmen and Irish women, in the name of God and of the dead generations from which she receives her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us, summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom. Okay, if you study that declaration very closely, you will find that that those who did that, and we will call them the nationalists, are inviting or are calling on Irish people to join forces with them so that they can eventually strike for freedom. If you also look closely, you're going to find that they appeal to people's sense of religion. They appeal to people's sense of tradition. And of course, the goal would be to free Ireland from Britain. Okay, so why do they appeal to people's sense of religion? Because the Irish society is a devout and is a religious society. Religion is very important for them. Okay, especially the Catholic religion. What else do they appeal to? They appeal to the old tradition of nationhood. The fact that they said that if you look back at our past as Irish, you're going to find us that we were an independent nation, and we had kings of our own. We have a system of our own. Okay, so it's we're not asking for something new. It's this is our country. We used to have our own kings, Irish kings, and we're inviting people to be part of what we're doing so that we can eventually have what we used to have, which is, our own government and stuff. Okay, so like I said, this is a groundbreaking event in the history of the Irish cause. The fighting is going to continue for perhaps 6 days, and of course you're going to have hundreds of people either killed or injured. Of course, the uprising is going to come to an end, and those who masterminded the uprising are going to be hanged or are going to be executed, killed by the British administration and the British government. Life is going to change beyond recognition. Two events in the history of the Irish cause are going to drastically change how the Irish looked at the idea of independence and the idea of separating themselves from the British. One major event was the idea of the Irish famine between 1845, I think, until 1851, where hundreds, perhaps thousands of people died of hunger. There was a famine. A famine is a massive starvation where people don't have access to food. And of course, if you don't have access to food for long stretches of time, you die. So during the famine, or the potato famine, or the Irish famine, in the 19th century, lots of people died, and a lot of other people had to flee the country for their lives, flee it because of the lack of food and everything, and they immigrated to the United States. This event is very important in the sense that it's going to change how the Irish looked at the idea of the idea of the separation. The fact that they during and after this famine, they decided that it's not only home government that they are after. It's not that they govern themselves under the British. They said no. So we're going to change our demands, and instead of demanding to self-rule under British administration, we're asking for complete independence. We don't want anything to do with the British anymore. So this was a change. This was quite a change. So a change from asking for only home government under British rule, you're now asking for complete independence. So this was one of the two major events that I told you about. The second major event would be what happened with the uprising in 1916, because the way the British dealt with the uprising was also catastrophic, for the British, of course. The fact that they killed so many people, and they also hanged and executed the leaders of this kind of uprising. This left a mark, and this left, it was very painful for the Irish, and again, and it didn't help the British in any way. People were more adamant than ever that the British have to go. Okay. So again, why the uprising? Why the revolt? Why would people take to the streets and try to claim or ask for self-rule and independence? They are under the British Empire, and obviously the British Empire is big and rich, and they would lose a lot. No, they were not losing anything, because under British occupation and under the British Empire, they lived a dismal life. Their life was miserable. They were not given any rights or privileges, and also they felt oppressed. The fact that the British administration, whenever they perhaps go out in order to express their opinions and what they feel, they are suppressed and in the harshest of ways. And they also felt discriminated against. Like I told you, the minority in Northern Ireland are having all the privileges, of course, for obvious reasons. The fact that they are unionists, they want to stay within the British Empire, and they are also Protestants like the British. So they were given all the rights, and the Catholic majority were denied all the rights. So it was only natural that the majority, the Irish majority, would feel bad about what is happening, and from time to time they would, violence would erupt and break out. And one such violent event would be the Easter 1916 uprising. Again, another perhaps a very important moment in the history of the Irish struggle would be 1922, because during that year they are going to declare independence, and they would become a state independent of Britain. So this came, I mean, the event and this moment, 1922, was also kind of there in 1921. They had a treaty. I mean, the British and the Irish, where they decided that Northern Ireland is going to be independent, independent of Ireland. It's going to have its own affiliations with the British Crown and the British rule, while the 26 other counties are in the rest of Ireland will form a state or a country independent of Britain. Okay, so the rest of the century, you're talking about 1922 until perhaps 1980 something, you will have the independent state of Ireland kind of negotiating a deal with the British, so that Northern Ireland become reunited with the rest of Ireland. They haven't reached an agreement. The only agreement that they came to was the idea that there is going to be a referendum. There is going to be some kind of vote, and the people of Northern Ireland would vote for either becoming part of larger Ireland, or they keep to their status as perhaps semi-independent. Again, we shouldn't be within all this talk about Ireland and their political struggle to achieve independence. We shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the main idea of the chapter would be tradition, and how tradition is mobilized to support the political causes of given nations and countries. In our context here, we have Ireland. We have the Irish nationalists who are mobilizing tradition in support of their cause. So what is their cause? They want Ireland independent of Britain once and for all. So as you can see, the Easter Rising is a focal point for this chapter. This is a very interesting. I would like you to look at this picture, where these are, by the way, British troops, and it can tell you about what happened over those 5 or 6 days. I'm talking about the Easter 1916 uprising. Okay. So again, we're talking about history and tradition, and how both are manipulated, according to the writer, of course, how they are manipulated and sometimes tampered with so that they can serve political purposes. Sometimes you do stuff unconsciously. Unconsciously means that you don't know that you're doing what you're doing. The writers of the chapter are, they stress the fact that whatever happened with this manipulation and this manufacturing and invention of tradition was done consciously. The nationalists, the Irish nationalists, knew what they are looking for. They said, in order for our own people to support us and to support our cause, which is achieving independence for them, they have to know, they have to be educated about their history and their tradition. We're trying to instill in them the fact that their history is as glorious as that of the British. We're going to instill in them that their tradition is as important, is as valuable as that of the British. Um, Again, here there is this stress and focus on the idea that countries and states, especially the nascent ones, those who are new, would use tradition to give themselves legitimacy. Again, they want to validate whatever movements they are starting by referring back to their tradition and their history. Again, normally, so what is it that they rely on when they go back to their tradition and their history? They of course go to those nice and brilliant parts of history. They don't just go and take stuff randomly, because obviously in any history there is the good and the bad. Of course, they would focus on those brilliant and those good parts of their history and their tradition. The writer is trying to say that this would be different if we're dealing with historians. Historians do not deal with history this way. Historians are dispassionate in their analysis, they are objective in their analysis, and they would bring in the good and the bad. But for nationalists, for people who have a cause, they normally refer to those bright sides of this history, and of course they ignore the bad ones. And this is what the writer or the writers are saying is bad. They say that you need to be objective, and if you're objective, you would bring in the good and the bad. But they are saying, of course, because there is a purpose, people or the nationalists would focus on the bright side of this kind of history. So accounts of the past are molded by people and movements in the present to serve their own needs. And this is what they describe as the invention of tradition. And of course, they are trying to say that we don't mean anything bad when we say the invention. We're just stating what's happening in an objective way, which is not true. Okay, so again, we're moving to the idea of tradition and the invention of tradition. Again, who invented the concept, the invention of tradition? It's a book of essays that was published in 1983 by two historians. One of them is Eric Hobsbawm, and the other is Terence Ranger. And they would look at examples of invented traditions. They would go through countries and they would see how much their traditions were invented. They would give examples of some of the ideas that were widespread in a certain culture so that they can revive tradition. and they can, and part of it would be invented, of course. And then they would talk about the manifestations of those traditions. I mean, the cultural icons that people use, the different, um, you know, labels and banners and emblems that those people use in order to appeal to people. They are giving examples of those invented tradition manifestations when they talk about, you know, the British government and their houses of parliament and how they look, the Gothic look of it, and the tradition that is that has been after or behind it. And then we the emblems and the symbols of this kind of invented traditions when you have flags and narratives, heroic narratives. Remember when we talk about the United States as a nascent or as a new country, if you compare it to ancient countries like Iraq, like Egypt, for example, because they are new and they are also appealing to tradition, so they don't have tradition to lay back on. So that's why they invent their own tradition. That's why you keep hearing English, American politicians referring more often than not to their founding fathers. And I mean, the phrase would give you the sense that those founding fathers were thousands of years old. When you get to know, you're talking about 200 and 300 years back. Again, they invent and create anthems that would also glorify their past. And they have emblems. They have certain logos and certain expressions that would click with people when we talk about Uncle Sam, for example. And the writers are trying to say that we're not saying invented tradition. We're not using the word invented tradition in a negative sense. We're just stating what is happening, and they even give the example of the Open University, and they say during graduation parties, the Open University ask their students to wear gowns that were worn by students in the 16th and the 17th century in Oxford and Cambridge University. So they also appeal to the past. They are trying to create and invent their own tradition because they don't have one, because the Open University was only established in 1969. So again, he's trying to say that this is legitimate and everything. Again, so what they are giving, those two historians, they are not giving us sequential history. They are not talking about events. They are very selective in their choices in order to prove a point, in order to reflect on a point and give us their conclusions. The points that they are reflecting on in Irish history would be those that are related to the cause that they have, the political cause that they have, the fact that they want independence eventually. Am I making sense, everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, doctor.
Okay, good. So again, the ultimate goal would be, I mean, the historians and even the writers of the chapter, and their ultimate goal would be to challenge our preconceptions by taking a general thesis or idea and applying it to a variety of different historical situations. Again, they are trying to tell you not to take things for granted, not to take historical events for granted, not to take sets of traditions for granted, because those sets of tradition might be created and invented, and they might not be original or true. Again, the why they are not true or why they are invented, because normally nationalists are creating them in order to kind of um, have access to the masses, to the people. They are trying to convince them of how fair the cause is by referring back to history and tradition, and by telling them your history and your tradition are as valuable as that of the occupier. Um, there is this part on the video or the DVD that you guys have that is accompanying this chapter, and it's also about this concept of invented tradition. Again, if you watch the video, you're going to have reference to the different events that we have been talking about. That there is, of course, a reference to what happened in 1916. There is going to be a reference to what happened in 1921 and 22, down to 1973, and down to even the 90s of the last century, the 20th century. Again, the idea would be basically to tell you how tradition is invented, referring to certain symbols that would, if you check, you will see that they go back to ancient history. In the case of the Irish cause, you would have harps, round towers, and wolfhounds. These are all symbols of ancient Ireland. Again, the idea would be to tell you that Ireland has history and tradition as rich as that of the English and the Scots. And people should be proud of that. And if they are proud of that, if you ask them to perhaps go out against the British, they would say yes, because we deserve a better treatment, because we have, our history is as rich and our tradition is as rich. Again, I said that this not only, I mean, the idea of inventing tradition would go beyond the 1922, when they have had their independence. I mean the Irish. This idea of invented tradition would affect the policies of the independent government when they start preserve and restore monuments from the past. So the decisions are going to be inspired by the struggle. For example, they would focus on restoring buildings and monuments that would go back to Irish history. And they would exclude and ignore those monuments and those places that remind them of the British and their rule. They, for example, wouldn't restore and repair places where the British administration used to be or to sit, like in the Dublin Castle, which was the seat of the English Viceroy. They wouldn't also restore the Royal Hospital Clemenham because it was the seat of the commander of the army, of the British Army in Ireland before 1922. Of course, over time, they are going to change their policy when they get or become rich. I'm talking about Ireland now, independent Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. When they become rich and when they join the European Union, they would have perhaps a more tolerant approach towards restoring old buildings. They would focus on the aesthetic value of the building. I mean, the reasons for restoring building would be artistic, aesthetic, and also they would say that even if we're talking about buildings that remind us of the British colonial period, we need to remember that those buildings were built and created by our own artists, by our own people, our own masons. So by restoring them, we're actually kind of showing the world how our artists, our architects, and our builders, how they are great and they are of a very high caliber. So again, so what is it that the Irish nationalists revived from the past? What kind of tradition were they focusing on? So actually the history of Ireland is both Christian and pagan. And of course, pagan comes before Christian. Pagan means that they used to believe in more than one God before the coming of Christianity. So during the time when they were pagan, they had kings. They used to call them high kings. And they were ruling at a place or that is called Tara. So you have the high kings of Tara. So this is pagan, and this is prehistoric. And then you have the Christian aspect of this tradition and this history, because they, I mean, Ireland was one of the early converts. I mean, its people were the early converts to Christianity, and they have their own traditions, and those traditions are very well respected in the Christian world. So they say we need to restore that. We need to instill in people that even when we were pagan, we were something, and when we became Christian, we were something. And this is history that is sometimes even more valuable than the history of the British. Again, and we're focusing on the idea that what happens with the past and bringing back the past, bringing back tradition and thinking of them happens in a conscious and in unconscious way. Again, the judgments whether and the decisions whether to preserve or conserve or demolish things from I mean historical documents and historical monuments is not based on aesthetic grounds, not because of the artistic merit of the building, but it is done based on whether this is Irish or British, whether it reminds me of the oppressive practices of the British, or it reminds us of our past and how glorious it is. And in either case, but this is very selective, highly selective, and selectivity, of course, is against objectivity according to the writers. Okay, so that would take us to the idea of nationalism. And of course, we are focusing on Irish nationalism. So would we call it nationalism or nationalisms? Actually, we would call it nationalisms because, uh, I mean, the nationalists are allied and agreed on the goal of their struggle, but they are not allied or agreed on how to get there, how to reach this goal. The goal, of course, would be to have an independent country, to have to achieve independence, total independence for Ireland. So the means are different. Some of those means are political, and some of them are cultural. That's why we're going to have in a minute, we're going to talk about political nationalism and we're going to talk about cultural nationalism. So to say nationalism would be a little bit inaccurate because we have different nationalists and they are different in their ways of achieving independence. So we would rather call them perhaps nationalist movements, as we're going to see. Again, you would have the impression that those are homogeneous, a homogeneous group. I mean, a group that have the same means of achieving something, the same approach. No. Again, like I said, they may be agreed on the ultimate goal, but the approach and the means are different. So what is it that nationalism is about now? Actually, it comes to two forms. One way would be, to achieve independence. And then when they achieved independence, minus the six counties of Northern Ireland, they started to have a different kind of struggle, and the other struggle would be to have the remaining six counties rejoin larger islands. Okay. Again, you cannot separate those different manifestations of nationalism. You cannot separate them from the Catholic Church. Like I said, Catholicism is deeply rooted in the Irish culture. Also the idea of being Republican. This is what they keep saying. Nationalism is about Catholicism, and it's also about being Republican. Republican means that we don't want to have a monarch ruling us. We don't want a king. We need a democracy. We need a head of state. Okay. So we'll talk now about the political nationalism, and we'll talk about the struggle that we have seen and the revolt that we have seen in 1916. And we need to always remember that 1916 was um, the culmination of you know, a long history of struggle against the British, struggle for independence. So 1916 is only one of the links on a very long chain. This long chain of struggle for independence was very prominent in the 19th century. Again, why, whether we're talking about 1916 or even before that, why, what are the reasons why the people of Ireland want to separate themselves from Britain? It's for the simple reason that they felt that they are, you know, underprivileged, the fact that they are treated in the worst of manners. They are taken for granted. They are abused by the British forces. And they also see that the Protestant majority, the Unionists, those in Northern Ireland, those who want to stay under the British rule, they see that those people are given all the privileges, they enjoy all the privileges. So those were good reasons, together, of course, with the oppression and the feeling of being, you know, being, you know, abused under British rule, oppressive, under the oppressive British rule. They felt that should stop, and like I said, these were reasons why they will struggle for their independence. Again, we need to stress the fact that when they started, they never thought of the idea of complete independence. The idea of complete independence only came after the Irish famine, or the potato famine of 1945-52, and also after the 1916 uprising, when they saw how the British administration treated the rebels, the so-called rebels, and and the leaders of the uprising, and how they executed them. So it's only after these events that people started to think of achieving complete independence. No home government under British occupation. No, we don't want that. We need complete independence. Again, so if we talk about political nationalism, we need to also be familiar with the fact that the Irish society was, for the most part, Catholic, and the minority were Protestant, and they were in the north. Again, why are we saying that? Because we're going to see that along with achieving political independence, there is going to be also an emancipation for the Catholic. Emancipation means that the Catholics will start to ask for their rights, and they are going to get them eventually and gradually. So let's start the story from the very beginning. We're talking about the political activism and the political nationalism in the 19th century. So we're going to start with what we call Catholic emancipation. Emancipation means to be freed from something, to be free of something. So you were chained, you were imprisoned, you were treated in a bad way, and you're trying to set yourself free. A similar expression would be the emancipation of women. So people keep talking about the idea that women are not treated in a nice way, women are not free. We have the term emancipation of women. Okay, so we have a similar term when we talk about the Catholics in Ireland. There was this idea that they have to be freed once for all and for all. So in the early 19th century, there was a campaign and it was called Catholic Emancipation. They were trying to emancipate or free Catholic. Freedom means that you give them the rights. You restore the rights. Okay, so this Catholic Emancipation campaign was started by Daniel O'Connell, who was a lawyer, and he would mobilize mass movements. Lots of people would go out in order to ask for the civil rights of the Catholics. Again, they would succeed in doing that in 1829, where the Parliament, the British Parliament, would have this Catholic Emancipation Act. Act means law. So there was a law that would give the Catholics some of their usurped rights, the right to perhaps have good education, the right to even be part of the voting process. Again, so it's Catholic, and it's Catholic emancipation is what it is about. So we spoke about Irish nationalism, and we said that at one point Irish nationalism was not discriminatory. Not discriminatory in the sense that you would have Catholics and Protestants. You don't have that division on sectarian grounds. So when the Catholic Emancipation Act came out, the Protestants felt some kind of, they were dismayed. They felt that nationalism is about Catholicism, and they are Protestants, so they felt some kind of disappointed as nationalism, the Irish nationalism. And ever since they felt something bad, and that perhaps may be part of the friction that we will see later. Again, so what are some of the achievements of this act, the Catholic Emancipation Act? The first achievement would be that lots of Irish people will become members of parliament. If you're a member of parliament, you can set laws, you can make laws that would help your cause. Again, so they were ambitious enough. After they took over the parliament, they became part of the parliament. I mean, the nationalists and the Irish, they started to call for another, they started a campaign to repeal the Act of Union between Britain and Ireland. So they proposed another law, and they said, listen, we need to stop this act. There was a law binding and tying Britain and Ireland, and it's called the Act of Union. They tried to repeal. Repeal means to revoke or to stop something. They wanted to revoke or repeal or stop the Act of Union. Again, that would cause issues, and that would cause problems with the people of Northern Ireland who were unionists, if you still remember. Again, there was this relative peace, if you like. And obviously, the British administration was not as harsh at this time, and that would perhaps push O'Connell to go on with his agenda, and his agenda this time around would be to revive interest in Ireland's ancient history and tradition. He would call for meetings at Irish historic places like the Hell of Tara, where he would talk about Ireland and ancient Ireland and how important and valuable ancient Ireland is. And he would, his message would be to attain or achieve political independence for Ireland. And he was doing that through peaceful means, being a member of the parliament, by campaigning and all these kinds of things. Again, he remains a very important figure in the in the Irish nationalist movement. That's why they would at one point erect or build monuments that would glorify him and honor him when he died. They actually built two monuments. One of them is pagan because it would refer back to the history, the Irish and the pagan history of Ireland at the place called Tara. And they would also erect a monument that would look like a monastery. Monastery means a place where people, Christian monks, would go inside and live the rest of their life worshiping God and nothing else. They would have a monastic tower for him. Okay, all of this is meant to honor the guy. Again, like I said, during the time when what's his name? When O'Connell was there, the most that they would dream of was to have home government, to rule themselves, to govern themselves under British rule or larger British rule. They never thought of complete independence. And like I said, with the potato famine of 1845, things are going to change because thousands of people are going to die, and other thousand would be forced to leave the country for the United States as immigrants, United States, Canada, and Australia. Again, the idea of having only home government is going to be different. Ever since the famine, people started to think of taking up arms against the British. This is one thing. And the other thing would be that they want complete independence. And they started to form movements, and those movements were militant. Militant means that they would use violent means to achieve their purpose. They were violent. So you have the militant movements like the Irish Republican Brotherhood, and in America they would have the Fenians. Again, those movements would focus in their early struggles on land reform. Land reform means that you have you have hundreds and thousands of acres of land, land that are farming land. And those thousands of acres, those large lands are given to, to the few. And the few here happens to be Protestant. Okay. And of course, those Protestants, those landlords who have all the land, were protected by the British government. So Irish movements would say, no, this is not fair. This is not good. We need to have a fair distribution of land. A fair distribution of land means that I don't mind if a Protestant is having a part of the land, but I also, as a majority, we need to also have parts of this land. We need not to be only tenants or people working in the land, but it has an owner who takes everything and leaves us peanuts, nothing, almost nothing. So again, that those movements, whether the Irish Republican Brotherhood or the Fenians, would focus on land reform, and land reform would mean that there would be some kind of fair distribution of the land. You take part of the land, and I also take part of the land. You don't take everything and leave me to work for you in the land. No, this is not fair. Okay, so where are people going to lobby for that? So two ways. One way would be through political and peaceful means, through the government, through the parliament, and the other approach would be if the parliament is not quick enough, we would take matters into our hand as political nationalist movements, and we can effect the change on the ground through violent acts. And so at the beginning, what did they want to achieve? They wanted to perhaps uh, um, um, ask or call for better um, tenant owner conditions. So instead of having the owner of the land and the landlord raising the price of tenants, I mean, they normally ask for a lot of money from the tenants. And if they don't pay, they tell them leave the land. So at the beginning, those political nationalist activists would focus on that, on changing this kind of relationship so that it can serve the tenant. And they did succeed. And there was also this idea of modern farming methods. The Anglo-Irish landlords who had all the land, they started to introduce modern farming methods. If you have modern farming methods, it means that you're going to get rid of a lot of the people because the machine is going to work. The machine is going to replace people, and in this case, lots of people will be left without income, and they will eventually perhaps die or something. So they started to work on that. When this didn't work or didn't work as well as they wanted, the nationals started to wage a war, and this was called the Land War of 1879, 1882. There was a great deal of unrest, a great deal of violence. Um, Again, the focus during the war would be on uh, on asking the landlords to perhaps ask for less money from the tenants. Again, the landlords are going to say, listen, the time is not the right one because the prices of the crops are declining already. So the tenants would say, no, we need rent reductions or else we're not going to pay the rent. Again, that would uh, um, make the landlords ask them to leave the land, of course. And of course, the tenants are going to leave the land, and clashes and violence will erupt. In the 1880s, there was what we call the Land League, which is also an organization, and this organization also asked for land reform. Again, they would take that all to the parliament, and the parliament would pass a number of acts, and those acts were meant to help the tenants. One of them would be instead of having landlords who have all the land, they would encourage tenants to purchase and buy part of the land. They would also ask the landlords to relinquish part of their estates because they are big. And then there was this Windham Land Act of 1903, which again would ask the landlords to give up parts of their lands, and they would take cash as compensation. And then in 1909, if the landlord and tenant do not agree, in this case, the parliament, this Land Act of 1909, would give the vendor, the tenant, the right to take the land. Take the land, of course, and give money to the landlord, even if the landlord does not accept the deal. Again, so as you can see, these are all achievements, good achievements. But again, you would have this clash within the ranks of the Irish themselves. You have the nationalists and you have the land reformers, the Irish land reformers. The Irish land reformers are working through the parliament, and the nationalists are working through their violent means. When lots of achievements are made, you still have cracks, you still have divisions among and between the Irish themselves. The nationalists especially would think, would dream of a time when land would be up for grabs. You don't have a land for John and a piece of land for George or for William. No, they don't want that. They want the land to be open and for everyone. And this is what they call, or this is what is known as communal land holding. And this is some kind of communism where there is no private property. You don't say that this land is mine and that land is Ali's. No. With communal land holding, the land is up for grabs. Go and cultivate or plant your land, and that would be it. No private property. Again, a part of this political nationalism that we're talking about, we will have the idea that the nationalists and the people of Ireland are getting privileges, and they are achieving good things. They become part of the political game in the parliament, and they would perhaps go to one side and give them the majority in parliament, and this one side that gets the majority of the parliament would, when when the election is over, for example, they would give them, they would promise them things and they would achieve those things. So they have those things help them in their struggle, and they would convince, prime ministers to make acts that would serve them and that would serve their cause. Again, alongside with the political nationalism, we have cultural nationalism. Um, and by cultural nationalism, hello, can you still hear me?
Yes. Yes, doctor.
Is it fun? Not really.
Not really.
It's a lot of events, but you can always think of the main ideas and the main points that we're talking about people in a state of struggle with an occupying force, and they are trying to achieve that politically and culturally. Okay. Culturally, it means that they would go all the way back to their history and tradition in order to make their own people aware of the fact that they had that the history that the British obliterated and demolished is still alive and kicking, that the tradition that they had is still there, and those sets of traditions and this history are as glorious, as valuable as that of the British. Now, this is the basic idea. And the basic idea is also how the history that we're talking about, the tradition that we're talking about, are manipulated and tampered with and manufactured so that they can serve political purpose. This is the main argument of the two writers. They are trying to tell us that we need to be alert about what we read about in history. History is, according to them, of course, history is not honey and milk. There are bad sides, there are black spots that are not spoken about. They are trying to tell us don't take things for granted and challenge things. Anyway, and now we're moving to the cultural nationalism, which worked in parallel with the political nationalism. When we talk about cultural nationalism, we're going to have three names. One of them would be lobbying for and promoting history, historical things. And what one of them would be promoting language, and would be focusing on restoring and reviving the Gaelic language of the Irish, the fact that they had a language of their own before the coming of the British. They are trying to restore this language. And the third figure that I'm talking about is somebody who is trying to revive the Irish literary traditions. The fact that they also had poetry of their own, they have mythology of their own, and stuff like that. So cultural nationalism, where we have Daniel O'Connell efforts. Um, actually, Daniel O'Connell is or belongs with the political activism and nationalism that we've been talking about. His efforts, if you still remember, were administrative and social, and he succeeded in that. If you still remember what he did, you spoke about him. And then we're moving now to Thomas Davis, and like I said, W.B. Yeats and George Petrie. Again, if you look at if you go back to Daniel O'Connell and what he did was administrative and political, you will see that he was indifferent to culture. Culture didn't mean a lot for him. With Thomas Davis and the others, the focus is on history and culture. So we start with Thomas Davis and a group of others, and they are known as Young Ireland. And what they did is that they started to raise people's awareness about the culture of Ireland. They started the Nation newspaper in 1842, and they were campaigning and lobbying for the preservation and encouragement of a distinctively Irish folk culture. They said, listen, if we go back to the villages, we're going to hear very beautiful folkloric stories about Ireland. Again, they said this can be a unifying force. It can instill a sense of nationhood among the Irish. The Irish need to know about their folklore. They need to know about their culture. And this is actually what he did. He said that this can also be unifying in the sense that the struggle between Protestants and Catholics is going to stop because they share the same history and the same culture. So he was looking for a common vision of the Irish nation inspired by its past that everyone, regardless of their denomination, could share, whether they're Catholics or Protestants. What is it that Davis would do? He would write extensively about Ireland's Celtic past, the past of the Irish way back thousands of years, prehistoric even. He would write extensively about that in the Nation. The Nation is the paper that he established, and he would also publish scholarly works on historical figures, such as George Petrie. He would also campaign for education about Ireland's past and the preservation of its monuments. Again, one of the things that he did was that he complained and protested against the construction of a road that would go through the prehistoric remains of at New Grange. New Grange is where Ireland's high kings were. So the common goal, the shared goal among all cultural nationalists was to establish the fact that the people of Ireland had a rich and an ancient culture which justified their sense of nationhood. Again, like I said, cultural nationalism was made up of different sections. You would have a part that would focus on antiquity, on ancient past, even prehistoric past, and that in this case you would have George Petrie. You would have Douglas Hyde, who would focus on the Gaelic language, the fact that Ireland used to have its own language away from English, and he was trying to restore that by establishing what they call the Gaelic League. And the third voice and the third section or strand would be William Butler Yeats, and who was a poet and a leading member of the Anglo-Irish literary revival. He would focus on literature and reviving the literature of the past. So again, Petrie represented the antiquarian interest. Antiquarian means prehistoric past. Hyde would focus on the language, reviving the language of the Irish, and Yeats or Yeats would focus on the literature, reviving the literature of ancient Ireland. Again, Petrie, like I said, would focus on whatever brings back the history, the pre-history of Ireland. And he had this belief that when the English came, they demolished and they destroyed the history of Ireland. He said that they deliberately demolished and obliterated this history. He was interested in reviving the names and the places and the writings of the past. Again, he would also say one reason why we have social unrest and we have religious unrest, I mean, Catholics and Protestants would be the fact that people are ignorant about their history, are ignorant about their shared history. If they know that this history brings them together, they wouldn't fight each other and they would focus their fight against the occupier. Again, he was a tireless worker who published learned articles on both the monastic origins of the Round Towers and the history of the Hell of Tara. And then we move on to the second voice, or to the second cultural figure. And the second one was Douglas Hyde, and like we said, he was interested in reviving the Irish language, and it's called the Gaelic language. And he would do that by talking about education and how this Gaelic language should be part of the education of children. Again, what didn't help was the fact that the parliament made a number of acts and they would focus on English or the English language as the language of instruction and the language used in education. This is together with the fact that lots of people, of course, and lots of those who spoke Gaelic were either died because of the famine or they left the country and immigrated somewhere else. And this is what he said at one point. He said that the Gaelic League has the best possible reason for believing that if Ireland is to become a really cultured country and an artistic country, she must cease to imitate and must take up the thread of her own past and develop from within upon native lines. And he would refer to the things that Ireland left or given up over the years or lost. He would say she lost her musical instruments. This is Ireland, by the way. She lost her music. This is Ireland. She lost her games. She lost her language. You would focus on language. And popular literature. With her language, she lost her intellectuality. If you use, according to him, if you use your language, you use your intellectuality. Again, like you see, the focus here on this part is on the fact that we have two histories, two conflicting histories. We have the ancient history of Ireland, and this is genuine, and this is purely Irish, and we have the modern history of Ireland, where the British and the Scots are now part of it. The English language is part of it, and of course, the ancient history is more valuable according to those activists. Again, what is interesting about Hyde was the fact that he said that we need to do that also um, without agendas. We shouldn't have political or sectarian agendas, and this is something that his young followers would not like, and eventually he would resign from the league, and that would be it. We move to the third figure, and the third figure is W.B. Yeats. And he is a very famous Irish poet, of course, and dramatist. And he was part of the Anglo-Irish literary revival. You see, it's Anglo-Irish. Anglo means we're talking about Anglicans. I'm sorry, we're talking about Protestants in the League. He was trying to revive the literature and mythology of Ireland. He founded what we call the Abbey Theatre in Dublin, where he would write and ask other Irish writers to go back to in ancient, Irish mythology and get inspired and write plays along those lines, so that they can educate people about their ancient mythology and ancient culture. Again, the Anglo-Irish revival was to revive and reinterpret in English the culture of Gaelic Ireland, especially in its mythology, and in particular the legend of Cuchulainn. This is Irish. Again, we would have a problem. The problem would be that when Yeats and his followers would write plays or write poetry, they, poetry and the other stuff are free in the sense that they don't have taboos. When they write poetry or they write plays, they don't care very much about morality. They present things as it comes to their mind. That would clash with the Irish moral sensibility. Remember that the Irish were deeply religious. So when they see on the stage plays that are, of course, those plays are promoting the culture of Ireland, the ancient culture, but they see obscene scenes, sexual material, they would say no. They would complain, and they would say, no, this is not what they want. And we have an example. Yeats himself, wrote a play by the name of the Countess Kathleen. And it was produced on the same theater in 1899, but it was refused and rejected by the church and by the people, because in this play, Countess Kathleen agrees to sell her soul to save famine-stricken peasants, and that would outrage the Catholic sensibility. They would say, no, this is not religious. How come somebody would sell his soul to the devil? Even if this was meant in good faith and in order to save other people. And we also have another play. It's In the Shadow of the Glen, um, and a third play, The Playboy of the Western World. When you look at them, you're going to find that they have this sense of liberty. The fact that the writers are liberal, they are not conservative. And in one of the plays, there is this portrayal of a wife as unfaithful. This was a no-no. And in another play, you would have the boy killing or perceived to have killed his father. And this is also a no-no. So as you can see, for nationalists, literature and the theater were primarily vehicles of propaganda to be used for the creation of or in order to recreate traditional Irish culture. Again, this culture was Gaelic, what Catholic was moral. So if I mean, if if it's only Gaelic, no, people wouldn't accept it. It has to be Gaelic, it has to be Catholic, which means religious, and it has to be moral, because um, the Irish society is a conservative one. Making sense so far? Do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Would you like to take perhaps a 10-minute break or something?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we're meeting in 10 minutes. I'll keep everything as is, okay? Are we all back? Bismillah.
Yes.
Okay. Well, let me just ask if you're all back, say something. So Sausan is here. Who else is here?
Here, Jumana.
Hi, Jumana. Do we have May? Dima?
Yes, doctor.
Okay, May. Jamila?
Yes, doctor.
Hi, Jamila. Lama Sulaiman.
Yes, doctor.
Hi, Lama. Yasmin Badr.
Yes, doctor.
Asir Mubarak.
Yes, doctor.
Mahmoud Abdul Hamid. Okay. طيب بسم الله. Okay, let me go back to the slides. Can you see that?
Yes, doctor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
So
doctor.
it's okay. Good. So the Easter Rising of 1916, we excuse me, we already spoke about that. So we have seen how the Easter Rising broke out in Dublin in 1916, and how the rebels comprised an alliance of Republican nationalists, labor activists, and opponents of any home rule proposal that involved partition. And of course, we spoke about the one who started it all. It's Patrick Pearse, who was a school teacher. Okay, of course, you know what happened. And like I told you, one reason why people started to lose interest in having self-rule under the British Empire and move to the choice of complete independence would be this particular uprising, because of what the British administration and government did, the fact that they executed all the leaders of the uprising, and there was a great deal of bloodshed and all these kinds of things. Remember when we spoke about the fact that there was a declaration and a proclamation? We're going to focus on the proclamation of the Republic of Ireland. Proclamation means that you're going to write something, you're going to write a manifesto where you declare in public that you have effected a certain change, or you came out, or you brought about a big change. And the proclamation of the Republic of the Independent Republic of Ireland is one of those proclamations. So when you deal with proclamations, you need to ask who wrote them, and that they address who is the intended audience, and it was written when, and whether the document is public, private, official, or published. You talk also about the historical context, what happened before and what will happen after, and comments on certain things. So if we talk about this proclamation of independence, we're going to find that it was written by Patrick Pearse, and of course it was intended for the people of Ireland, all of the people of Ireland, and it was made public in 1916. Again, it's a public declaration by a group of rebels. By the way, to say that they are rebels is very biased. Okay, so they are rebels when looked upon from the perspective of the British, and they are freedom fighters when looked upon from the perspective of the Irish. So it's a public declaration by a group of rebels of the justice of their cause. Again, you write a declaration in order to state your reasons why you have started the uprising. And you appeal, sometimes you appeal to people to join forces with you. Again, if you still remember, we said that it appeals to people's sense of religion, and it also it appeals to their sense of past and their sense of tradition. Again, how is the past evoked? By talking about the dead generations, by talking about the old tradition of nationhood, by also talking about the rebellions and revolts that the people of Ireland mounted over the past 300 years. Again, what are the achievements? What are the achievements of the uprising and of the proclamation? If you get to know that after 5 or 6 days, the leaders of the uprising would surrender and would ask their followers to surrender. So you would automatically think that they didn't achieve nothing, but in actual reality, this event and this uprising was transformation, so transformational that life in Ireland after 1916 was completely different. Again, it's the uprising and also the mishandling of the uprising and the reaction of the British to the uprising that made all the difference. Okay, you need to remember that the British administration or government executed all the leaders of the uprising, killed hundreds of people. That, of course, would raise the resentment of people, would increase the resentment and their frustration. And they would they start to think of perhaps ways as how they can react. And react, and they did. How did they react? They reacted by, instead of asking for self-rule under British occupation or under British administration, they would call for complete independence. In fact, this is no small thing. So they did achieve something. So again, following the rising, the British authorities sentenced 90 of their rebels to death. This is big. Okay. Again, they would execute the leaders, and that would also a big thing. Again, that would lead to unintended consequences. One big unintended consequence would be the fact that people are now moving from asking for self-government to asking for complete independence. So we read or we spoke about the proclamation of independence or the proclamation of the Republic. There was also another letter, you know, then we're talking about how people reacted. And this letter was sent by Yeats to Lady Gregory. And Yeats and Lady Gregory are, of course, the leaders and the pioneers and the founders of the cultural or the literary, the Irish literary revival. Okay, so let's look at the letter that he sent to Lady Gregory. Actually, he's going to do two things. In order, W.B. Yeats is going to react in two different ways. One way would be to send a letter to Lady Gregory, and obviously when you send a letter to somebody, this is private. And the other one would be to write a poem. And of course, you write poem. You don't write poems to yourself. You write poem to people, for people to read. So the letter to Lady Gregory is private, and the poem is, of course, public. Again, what's the context? The context, of course, he was commenting on what happened in 1916. Was he there? No, he wasn't in Dublin. How did he come to know about it? It's through hearsay accounts. Again, why are we talking about the letter? Because it can give us insights. Can give us insights into how people reacted to the event. Again, he would also touch on some political issues. One big one would be the idea that he was skeptical about you know, the rebels receiving fair trials. Again, this is private communication, but it can tell you a great deal about what happened and how people reacted, because we're talking about Yeats, who happened to be an international figure. Okay, and then the second thing would be the poem that Yeats wrote, and it's called Easter 1916. I would like us to perhaps go, where is it? It's at the end of the chapter. Can we go there? Let me see if I can bring it in. Yeah, this is the letter. This is the poem. Let's read the poem. Is it long? Yes. Do you have that? Do you have the book handy, Jamaa?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Doctor.
can you read the poem? Or else I'll give it stanza by stanza. Every time you finish, tell me to go up. Okay? How about that?
I can read it from my book, but like I don't know about the others if they have it or not.
So if you have the book, what page is that, yeah, Dania?
183.
183.
Yes.
And we have it on the screen. Every time you finish a stanza, let me know so that I can move up. Okay? We're all reading, huh?
Yes.
Shall I move on?
Yes.
Shall I move on?
Yes.
Shall I move on?
Yes.
Can you figure out what he wants to say? Is he straightforward?
I
What do you
think he
think?
is.
So, yani, what is so straightforward about him? Is he for or against what happened?
I think he's against because he said for England may keep faith.
Mm-hmm.
So he's against the Easter movement, like what happened at like
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's okay. So What about, I think we have a refrain. A refrain is a sentence that, or a word or a number of words that gets repeated. What about the refrain that
Yeah,
a terrible beauty is born?
Yes, he repeated that like at the end of the poem.
I'm
And
saying, isn't that a contradiction? You're saying that he was against the uprising, and then he is saying that a beauty is born, and he's also saying at the very beginning, he's saying, wait, let me check. All changed utterly, right? Can you see that? All changed utterly, right?
so you're saying he's with the movement or the
I'm
uprising?
saying that he is fluctuating. Fluctuating means that he is ambivalent. Ambivalent means that he's not very clear.
Maybe he's somewhere in between, like with
Yeah.
and against.
You can, and sometimes, and times like these, you cannot be in between. You're either this or that. And you remember that he is a nationalist.
Yeah,
Remember that he is Irish. So we would have expected him to be on which side,
on the Irish side for sure.
right?
Yeah.
So to say that he is ambivalent and is fluctuating is not is not good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Perhaps he has remembered that he was an international figure. And what is ironic about the poem is that you can be criticizing the English using their own language. Remember, he is using their own language, right? And he is also using their literary traditions. The poem is written in English within the British or the English tradition. Perhaps this was restricting and limiting to him. Perhaps if he wrote it in Gaelic, which I don't know whether it existed or not, he could have been less restricted and less, um, you know, imprisoned. I mean, he is writing within the traditions, the literary traditions of the occupier, and this may have placed limitations and restrictions on him. Let's go back to,
Maybe he's trying to provoke something among the people.
yeah, what is it that he wanted to provoke?
I don't know, maybe their sense of like where do they actually stand, especially like the North Ireland was like against the nationalist movement and uprising. So like maybe he proposed this poem in order like to provoke something inside of them. I don't know, it's just like a wild analysis.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So, I mean, everyone has a right to his own analysis. You're doing a good job. Go to this part again. Okay. Okay. So again, Easter 1916 is one of W.H.'s most famous works. Of course, as the title indicates, it's about what happened, the historical events. And it's a text where you can almost tell that there is this intertwining between the personal and the political. So would we characterize the poem as traditional or dissenting, and why? Critics have debated the meaning of the poem ever since its first publication. So it's not only us who are confused. So this has always been the attitude towards the poem. No two people agree on what exactly the poet meant. So the poem is about this dynamic between whatever is traditional and whatever is dissent or dissenting. So in Easter 1916, you have both traditional and innovatory features. It is rhyming, you have rhyming stanzas of different length. Obviously, this is not traditional. You have refrains when he says, all changed utterly. A terrible beauty is born. This is also not traditional. And these devices powerfully suggest that Yeats was writing within the traditions of English poetry. And he was perhaps imitating and copying people like Blake and Donne, where verse is an elegant arrangement of lines and stanzas. However, the poem deviates means deviates from tradition. It uses many half rhymes. You also notice Yeats' fondness for repetition, the fact that he repeats himself, and this is also not traditional. And you have those sharp contrasts between the normal between normal existence and the terrible and beautiful change that were brought about by the uprising. So as you can see, you can almost tell that he was modifying poetic tradition. Okay, so you have this oscillating, wavering between whatever is traditional and whatever is dissenting and non-traditional. We should also recognize that the poem implicitly descends from British rule in England because it's written in English, but in part of it is against British rule. So this is a poem written in English, but it opposes English rule. So, and the implication is that the rising or the uprising has irrevocably changed Irish nationalists, giving them a forward momentum, which is at once disturbing and intoxicating. Again, like I said, his attitude is ambivalent. Ambivalent means it's not direct and you don't know which side he is on. On the one hand, he pays generous tribute to men he disliked, like MacBride. Again, at other points, he would say bad stuff about them. So at one point, like I said, he pays generous tribute to the leaders of the uprising. On the other side, the poem is extremely vague about what precisely the rising achieved. He doesn't know. He says, "What did we achieve?" So as you can see, the poem resists drawing any clear political moral from the events of 1916. In one of interpretations, the poem is notable for refusing to condemn the British state's executions of Macdonald, McBride, and Conway and Pierce. He should. I mean, he stops short of condemning and attacking those executions. Again, people wouldn't like this kind of ambivalence, this kind of you know, lack of straightforwardness in criticizing the British. So the poem would have been better if it was a more explicit, if there was a more explicit celebration of what people did, and of course a lament for those who died or got killed. But we don't have that. Okay, and then we move to the part after Easter. So Easter 1916, like I said, was very transformational, and it changed life beyond recognition. And it was perhaps responsible for the achievements that Ireland had. The fact that in 1921 there was this partial independence, and in 1922 it came into effect. So again, over time, the Irish are going to perhaps take charge of their own destiny. They are going to be a part of the World War One. Some of them would side with the British, and others would side with the other with the Germans. Over time, they would have majority in the parliament, and they would also you know, kind of lobby for more rights. The parliament is going to, they will have a parliament of their own, and it will start, and the term would go on perhaps for 6 months until the British government decides to close it down. Again, there is going to be this struggle. So first of all, they would have their independence, but also this unique status of Northern Ireland, where you have those 6 counties that we spoke about. In 1922, they will have the treaty will come into effect, and they become independent. And ever since 1922, they will work towards lobbying for the unification of Ireland. They want, or they wanted Northern Ireland with its 6 counties to be part of larger Ireland. again, together with the political solutions, there will be also violence. Again, the violence of the British will also be perhaps more fuel uh, um, for the Irish to ask for more, especially the annexation of those six counties in the north. Again, we go back to the idea of using the past in order to serve the nations or the nascent nation's purpose. So the nationalists' emphasis on the past inevitably drew on the period of the earliest Irish legends before the era of written history. Again, why would they go that early or that far? Because this was the time when they had their own language, when they had their own government, where they had their own history and their own, culture and everything. Again, the question remains: if you know that the Irish or the English have been there perhaps since the 17th century, and if you know that the Scots, who are also part of Great Britain, were there before, isn't that also history that should be referred to? No. Uh, um, the Irish are selective when it comes to choosing which part of history to highlight, and this is, of course, for obvious reasons. The fact that if they are fighting against the English, they wouldn't refer to that part of history where the English were part, right? It makes sense. They would refer to only those parts that would link them to their ancestors who were not under any occupation. So it was too contentious. While all nations require creation myth, you start your own creation. You say we started this way, and the writer here is referring to that as myth, as you can see. And they are acknowledging the fact that the Irish people triumphed against British imperialism by creating their own narratives and their own mythical narratives. Again, they are stressing the fact that, yeah, it's okay, they succeeded and everything, but don't tell us that this is true history. No, this is not the kind of history written by academics and published in scholarly journals. Rather, it's a history of dramatic stories, murders, persecution, heroes and villains, colorful paintings, posters, and banners, and sound bites. Again, it's the same story. Yeah, they invented their own tradition in order to use it as fuel for their struggle. Okay, so the writers keep reminding us of that fact. Again, you need to also remember that we don't see the writers very objective here. Okay, so again, we come back to the idea of the period after independence, the period after 1916 and after 1922 and 1923. What do we have in this period? We have policies, policies by an established government. Okay, and then people start to check those policies and see whether those policies are objective policies or are meant to obliterate anything that would remind them of the British and their rule. Again, you would look at that in order to check whether this was these policies were objective or not. When it comes to the restoration and of monuments, old buildings, you would find the government um, is not basing its decisions as whether to restore a building, a historic building or a historic monument or not, based on whether it has artistic values, it has historical significance. They would focus on whether it has anything to do with the British or not. So if the building that they want to restore is somehow related to the British occupiers and the British administration, they would say no. I mean, they don't talk about it. They just ignore it and they expose it to decay. If you don't, of course, restore it over time, it will collapse and crumble. And this is what they used to do. But if the buildings or the monuments belong to ancient history, to ancient Irish culture and history, they would restore it right away. We have an example. One of the scholars by the name of Terence Dooley says that some 300 private country houses were destroyed during the period 1916-23. And she says that, or he, of course, we don't know whether this was the consequence of a genuine collapse of law enforcement or of the new Irish government turning a blind eye to the activities of local republic. So the buildings, because these are country houses owned by Anglo-Irish, owned by Protestants, they were destroyed by the Republicans and the Nationals. And we don't know whether the government knew about it and did nothing or not. And that would all go under the phrase reversing Cromwell's policy. Cromwell, of course, is a British historic figure, and he is the one who brought occupation to Ireland, who was the one who occupied Ireland. So the phrase reversing Cromwell's policy means obliterate and destroy whatever links Ireland to Britain. So again, like I said, it's all about whether to preserve old monuments and old buildings, and what is your criteria for choosing the buildings to restore. Are they political, which means that you only favor those Irish buildings, or are they aesthetic and artistic, where you look at the value, the artistic value of the thing itself? So this is basically what the chapter is about. Okay, do you guys have any questions related to the chapter?
No, thank you.
Okay, I think I need to just give me a second. Okay, so no questions before we leave?
Can I ask about Team A?
Yeah, you can.
I need a feedback if there is.
Yeah, we would like to have given you the feedback on the spot, but for some LMS reasons, we will have to perhaps delay it till perhaps Monday or Tuesday. But let me share with you some of the remarks about the different TMAs. Let me say that a lot of the TMAs that you have produced are plagiarized. A lot of the TMAs that you have produced are short. A lot of the TMAs that you have produced are um, irrelevant. We ask you about something and you create your own title and you answer your own question. This is not acceptable. If the plagiarism percentage is 80 or 90 or 95, and this is detected by the system, not us. So 0 is what you deserve and 0 is what you got. Now, those people who are asking why you got a 0. Zeros are assigned by the system, not by me. Okay? I'm not the only one who looks on the TMAs. The TMAs are on the system and they are being audited. Other people review them. So I cannot ignore the system which gave you 95% similarity or 90% similarity or 80% similarity. So you should be blaming yourself, not blaming you. And people know me, you know how tolerant and how nice and how loving of my students I am. I would like for all you, of course, to pass and succeed, but there are things that I cannot do, like ignoring the plagiarism detection things. So lots of us have plagiarized big time, and this is bad, and this is sad as well. Okay, so any more questions?
What about the great TMA, Dr. Sama?
What about it? أنا بقول إيه يا محمد؟
The greats.
What about them? مالهم؟
I think grades. I check the SIS. It's not a great art and beyond.
طيب, I don't think we need the recording anymore.